The Prime Minister announces ease in COVID-19 restrictions. Businesses continue to complain. The economy continues to show no sign of growth. And Trump gets the job done. Welcome back, folks, to episode number 17 of Viewpoint, the Brian Heeraman podcast. It's great to have everyone tuning in. That is to say, new listeners and old listeners as well. Well, you all know the routine by now, but just as a reminder, be sure to check out this podcast on all major podcasting apps. That is to say, YouTube, Twitter, iTunes, Google Podcasts, and to all my international friends, you can find us on Spotify. Remember to like and subscribe and share this podcast with your friends and family as well. So, where do we start? What a week we've had. So much to get through, so much news taking place. COVID-19 rearing its head. But I guess it's COVID-19. And I don't know, but the borders being closed is really starting to get to me. I honestly feel trapped. I don't know if claustrophobic is for like when you in a small room or something like that. But I think Trinidad is definitely coming in that category for me. But I don't know how you all are coping. Maybe you guys can let me know what you all doing to deal with this entire COVID-19 lockdown situation. But tonight I want to talk about COVID-19 again because the Prime Minister had a press conference recently, Saturday, that was on the 25th. And I want to explore exactly what he said in that press conference. Sorry. So I believe he was in Tobago when he had his press conference, and he was announcing that how he's going to ease some of the restrictions. He's going to relax some of the restrictions that we were presently under. But what did he say exactly? That is what I want to get to. I want to try and understand exactly what he said, and I want to give you my perspective on what I think what he said. So he mentioned beaches would now be open to the public, and guests at hotels and guests at guest houses will now be able to use swimming pools that are available for them. He also said that casinos and theaters and member clubs would be given the green light to operate at 50% capacity, but they will not be able to serve food. He also went on to say that our places of worship, can open for 1 hour long service, but they would also have to be restricted to 50% capacity. I'm actually happy about this one, not kinda, because I think it's good to bring back God into the equation. I think, you can never tell what's going on in terms of fate, but in situations and in times like these, any extra help is always welcome. Gyms can also be reopened but until 10 p.m. with 50% capacity and via appointments only. Gym operating via appointments. I'm not quite sure how that is going to work. I'm actually surprised that the Prime Minister would announce the reopening of gyms, but I guess with proper sanitizing and protocols, anywhere should be allowed to open. It's business, and we need business operation to get jobs back and get his economy kickstarting again. Schools will remain closed, but practical work and labs for adult education and post-secondary and tertiary institutions can proceed. And finally, Prime Minister announced, which is my favorite, of course, all public servants will be required to resume work 100%. I can't wait to hear the union response to something like that, given what's been going on or what's been transpiring. Now, I went through the list deliberately and in detail since, like I said, I wanted to give you my take on it. And I want to make an argument that what the Prime Minister announced in my mind was basically absolutely nothing. Mere fluff. With the exception of all public servants returning to work, nothing. Now, it's difficult for me to understand that taxis can remain at 50 or was it 60% capacity, whatever the number was. There's still under restrictions. But other areas are also under restrictions, and then the restrictions stay. But public servants must return to work 100%. Now, I hear the Prime Minister, but is it that public servants have some sort of immunity to COVID-19 because you're asking everybody to return to work, but other areas under restrictions? To me, it doesn't make sense. It's like some sort of double standards taking place here. But Okay, like I said, I can't wait for the union to explain that one and to come up what they're going to say about that one. Over to you, Watson Duke. But folks, nothing the Prime Minister announced will have any positive impact on the economy of Trinidad and Tobago. And this is an economy that I dare say is on an edge, ready to collapse at a moment's notice. The Prime Minister said that bars will remain closed for at least another 2 weeks, and restaurants will not be allowed to resume in-house dining. Well, it's been 7 months since these things have been going on in restaurants. I don't even know what in-house dining is anymore. I mean, it's been so long since I've been able to go out in-house dining, go and sit down with borders being closed. I don't know how we're gonna be able to get used to going back to in-house dining. When next are we going to be able to go to towns with these borders being closed? And, on the social media side of it, I mean, I'm seeing many people, they were celebrating and they were grateful for being able to return to the beaches and the cinemas. But I honestly don't get it. I don't understand what is to celebrate. I mean, why should I be grateful for the government retaining my rights, which they took from me? As a matter of fact, I am demanding that the government return all my rights at the end of this and end this fast lockdown that is doing nothing to stop or slow the spread of COVID-19. That's my thing. I mean, you give me back the ability to go to the beach. Well, I always had the ability to go to the beaches. You took it away from me under the presumption that you were going to slow the spread of COVID-19, which never became a reality. But we get to that later on. In any event, and sadly, I think the business community, they don't share the enthusiasm shown by some in the general public. You see, most businesses were disappointed with the relaxed measures announced by the Prime Minister yesterday. If you look at the guy from Movie Tongue, Derek Chin. But first of all, let me say it. I have a colleague of mine who works for Derek Chin. So I tend to pay more attention when he speaks. Now, Derek Chin slammed the nonsensical expectations for cinemas to open and to operate without serving food and drinks. I hear you, Derek Chin, I hear you. But really, who wants to go to the movie and to even buy popcorn or not have the ability to buy popcorn? Fellas, are you hearing cheap dates is back in progress? I mean, make the effort now while concessions are closed. You have a good excuse. But seriously, who's going to watch a movie under those circumstances? Movie night is a family night. It's a night to get out. A night to take your girlfriend out or your boyfriend out. A night to impress. Dress for the occasion if that is what you're into. The drinks and the food is all part of the movie experience. But going back to Derek Chen, he said reopening cinemas without allowing one to eat or drink during the movie is a joke and it doesn't make sense. I'm glad he agreed with me. He said that cinemas depend on concessionaires for large proportions of its revenue, and thought of going to a cinema that doesn't serve snacks combined with social distancing is nonsensical. Like I said, I agree with that. I mean, who wants to go to the cinema and not be able to buy anything? Or who wants to be able to go to the cinema with your family or, with your boyfriend and girlfriend and so we're going to, she sits at seat 1 and you sit at seat number 3? It doesn't make sense. Now, Mr. Chen said that he's very disappointed because this whole social distancing thing in the cinemas is nonsensical. There's no evidence to show that COVID-19 was ever an outbreak at any cinema, he's saying. I guess I can agree with that. Now, remember Direction, the same guy who was forced to shut down the Movie Town branch in Chaguanas a couple of weeks ago for reasons ranging from no revenue owing to COVID-19 and the cinemas being closed and to rental payments. Something happened with he was unable to pay the rent and he decided to shut down that operation. Well, that branch anyway. But Direction continues that cinemas are not the source of COVID-19 outbreaks. He said that this argument was made very clear to the Minister of Health and to the Chief Medical Officer. Now, if Direction made this argument to the Minister of Health and to the Chief Medical Officer, no wonder why they can't listen to him or understand him. Because in my opinion, trying to convince these gentlemen makes no sense. You are talking to people who have agendas and who have a limited understanding of anything sensible. You see, this is a Chief Medical Officer and a Minister of Health that changes the tune faster than the blink of an eye. Whatever happened to reviewing the World Health Organization guidelines that the World Health Organization themselves reviewed? Remember when the Minister of Health said it out when the WHO recommended that shutdowns is nonsensical and all it does is create more poverty? He said he was going to review those guidelines and then come back to us. Well, I haven't heard anything about those guidelines being reviewed so far. I thought the Minister of Health and the CMO were all into this World Health Organization best practices and guidelines. But when you have a political agenda, the guidelines no longer matter from the World Health Organization, right? Isn't that how it works in Trinidad? Folks, you heard it first on this podcast that the World Health Organization is a corrupt organization serving the interests of anyone with deep pockets. That's how the WHO works. They have no best guidelines. They change their tune depending on what's going on. But this is a chief medical officer and a minister of health. They are going around telling everyone that cases are reducing, but we are over 5,500 cases and over 100 deaths. I think it's over 100 deaths. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. These people would say and do anything to get at a rate of 20 cases per day just to join this CARICOM travel bubble. As you remember, the Prime Minister said that how countries will be allowed to join the bubble providing that they have cases 20 and under. That is what they're trying to take down to. And they will do anything to get to that number. Now, listen to the direction further. He said that the sector has provided a lot of research on the COVID-19 spread in cinemas, but yet they have gotten no credible response. He said you can go to the beach and line up to have bacon shack, but up to now nobody said where exactly you're getting these spreads. Whether it's from bars, restaurants, or movie theaters, they have provided no information, and I agree with him. You see, clearly Derek Chen is feeling the pinch to some extent. I don't know to what extent he's feeling the pinch, but he's feeling the pinch. And these ridiculous lockdown measures, they are bringing that pinch. And I can tell his frustration. I can feel his frustration when I read his interview. You see, Chen is a businessman, an entrepreneur, and he's in this to make money. And the economy benefits from his entrepreneurial spirit and his drive when he takes a risk. Jobs are created when he takes a risk. Families are taken care of when he takes a risk. Taxes are paid and social standards of communities are elevated when Derek Chen takes a risk and open businesses. But according to Chen, he hires hundreds of people and restaurants are under serious pressure. Remember, he owns Texas de Brazil, if I recall correctly, and some new one, I think it's Jack's. But he's arguing that opening up the beaches does nothing to improve the economy. And he hit the nail on the head with this one because I wanted to get to this point. And I'm happy he raised it. So, I'm confused. How come you can open up the beaches, but rivers and ponds remain closed? So what are we saying here? Is it that salt water kills COVID? Did we get this from the World Health Organization? I mean, is this one of their guidelines as well? And if you could go to the gym, you mean you can't take a hike to a waterfall in the great outdoors? So what is it? Someone asked the Chief Medical Officer if COVID-19 is on trees as well? I just don't understand that. The CDC, the Center for Disease Control, and Dr. Fauci said it's okay to be in the great outdoors. So Trinidad and Tobago not following the Center for Disease Control or Dr. Fauci guidelines or what? Is it only the World Health Organization guidelines when it suits your purpose? Is that what we're doing here? Just look at America, for example. I'm getting to America now because I want to talk about some stuff going on in America. Just look at America. Trump is holding 2 or 3 rallies a day leading up to the November 3rd general elections. And they are in the great outdoors with their mask, taking their whatever precautions that they see necessary. But here in Trinidad, we can't go out in the great outdoors. We can't go and enjoy the river. Now, if the intention is to prevent gathering, why just open beaches alone? You should open up everything. Open up all the beaches, all the rivers, all the ponds. That way, the masses will now be able to divide into a much greater amount of areas and not just limited to beaches only. I really don't understand that. But I digress. Getting back to Chen here. Telling people that they can go to see a movie but can't enjoy a hot dog despite protocols doesn't make any sense. Having candy or popcorn at the hot dog is part of the whole movie experience. That's what Chen is arguing, and I agree with that, as I mentioned before. Chen added that employees, they are conscious of the fact that COVID-19 is wrong and is dangerous, and they have put measures in place to limit it. But these measures they have put in place has never been tested because they've never been open. So how can they test the measures? But going back to cinemas being open, anybody ever ask these cinemas owners at what level of capacity, in terms of occupancy that is required before a profit margin is made? I mean, when you go to the cinemas, they have multiple screens, and each screen takes a different amount of patrons. But with no concessionaires and 50% capacity allowed, does it even make sense to open up these cinemas? They have no new Hollywood films being released, or Bollywood for that matter. So clearly they will have to show reruns, which in and itself poses a problem in terms of attracting new patrons or even existing patrons that they would probably have. Maybe the occupancy required now, given the underlying conditions, is now 55%. But if you're only allowed 50% and your profit margin returns at 55% capacity, you think direction is going to open the cinemas for fun? Think again. He's in this to make money, folks. I mean, direction went on to say that we don't know if we are going to open up. Oh, interesting. I thought that way because I thought that was going to happen. Because if it is that your profit margin is made above 50% capacity, then why would you want to open? I mean, for what? Utilize all your resources for no reason. I mean, you're not going to get back anything in it. Right now, in my mind, everybody is feeling this pinch, and the longer this thing goes on, I think it's going to be much more difficult to come out of. And the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce, they also had some tough words for the Prime Minister announcement on Saturday. They released a news release, and the group was saying that the relaxed measures announced by the Prime Minister are insufficient and will have little positive impact on the economy. I've been saying this. These lockdowns makes no sense. All it does is just creating more poverty and more joblessness. The chamber went on to argue that our sectors of the economy have been reopened, but still many businesses remain closed, including food businesses and beverage sector. And some of these businesses have been closed for 7 months. Now, can you imagine having a business and having it closed for 7 months? Would you as an individual still be operating? We should be grateful for any of these businesses that open back after being with no revenue for 7 months. It's insane. How are they able to sustain? Are they paying rent? Are they still paying their employees with no revenue? That is very interesting. Now, this now feeds into another point that I've been making on this podcast for quite a while. So, the International Monetary Fund now expects that the Trinidad and Tobago economy to decline by a massive 5.6%. Now, this is a large contraction that the fund had made originally. But prior to this prediction, the International Monetary Fund had made a prediction that the economy was going to shrink by 4.5%. And if I remember correctly, they made this prediction in April 2020. This new forecast announced a 1.1% higher rate of decline. But if I remember correctly, the Minister of Finance in his budget presentation, he reported to Parliament in the Budget 2020-21 debate that the Trinidad and Tobago gross domestic product (GDP) would decline by some 6.8%. So he's even higher than what the International Monetary Fund is predicting. They predicting 5.6, he predicting 6.8. Neither figure is good for Trinidad and Tobago economy, but that's what it is. Folks, Trinidad and Tobago is feeling fast. And I think what we need are people in charge that are willing to increase the metabolism of government, get things going fast, increase the pace of work, increase, stimulating revenue, stimulating getting jobs going. If we don't have these things, we're just sitting ducks waiting to collapse. And hiding behind excuses such as COVID-19. This economy was in tatters before COVID-19 and nothing was being done then, and I still haven't seen anything being done now. And that is scary. But this is Trinidad, we move on. So I know I see Gary fighting that is our favorite commissioner of police, everybody blue-eye boy, Gary Griffith, fighting the Trinidad Express. I don't know how many times on this podcast I'll talk about Gary Griffith, so I've deliberately tried to stay away from him because in my mind, he is a square peg, not even in a wrong hole. Find a different shape for Gary because he thinks that by coming out there and just talking loud and blowing up, beating up his gum, he's going to solve something. He can continue to sit in his office and his comfy chair in his air-conditioned office and think that he could, manage the police service by all these fluff talk. He's wrong. And he's in for a rude awakening one of these days. I wait patiently for when this government gets tired of him and do what they want to do in my mind. But enough of Trinidad and Tobago. I think I've exhausted all of these things that are going on in Trinidad and Tobago. Let's talk about America, my favorite topic, of course. And as you all are aware that the Senate is going to move on Monday evening, that's the 26th, for a full vote on the Senate floor for the confirmation of ECB. ECB being Amy Coney Barrett. Now, as you all are aware, the battle continues in Washington with the confirmation of ECB. And once confirmed, this will be Trump's third appointment to the Supreme Court of the United States. Some presidents in 2 terms of office don't even get one, but here, President Trump, in just his first term, is about to get approved his third Supreme Court justice. Now, this will tilt the balance of court for decades to come, as justices to the Supreme Court enjoy lifetime appointment. Now, what do I mean by tilting the court as it pertains to how laws are interpreted? That's what I mean. Tilting the court as it relates to how laws are interpreted. That's what I meant to say. And I'm not sure how I can explain this, but Democrats like to appoint liberal justices while Republicans like to appoint conservative justices. So, what's the difference between a liberal judge and a conservative judge? So, let me use the words of Anton Scalia, who was a former Supreme Court justice for conservative Republican judge. And he explained it best how conservatives and how Democrats view the appointment of justices to the Supreme Court. Now, a conservative judge would be one that falls into a category called originalism, which is a subspecies of a category called textualism. Now, what textualism means is that you're able to govern, or you govern by the text of the law. So that is to say, you read the law and you go by what is written. That's the only thing that is relevant to your decision. Not whether the outcome is desirable, not whether the legislative history says this or that, that is to say precedent, but the text of the statute. That's all that matters to textualism. Our originalism judge will say that when you consult the text, you give it the meaning that it had when it was adopted, not some later modern meaning as in today. In the case of the United States Constitution, when it was written in, I think it was the 18th century, you try to find what those words meant in the 18th century and you apply it now. So, the best example being the death penalty. Now, it is absolutely clear that the American people never voted to prescribe the death penalty. They adopted a cruel and unusual punishment clause at a time when every state had the death penalty and every state continued to have it. Now, a liberal judge would say that would be one that falls into a category called purposivism. Purposivism meaning consulting the purpose of a statute and deciding the case on the basis of what will further the purpose. Now, a textualist judge consult purpose as well, but only the purpose that is apparent in the very text. Take, for example, litigation involving attorney fees, wherein the winning party in a litigation will get fees, lawyer fees, of attorney fees, that is to say, sorry. The issue is whether those fees include fees paid to expert witnesses. Now, you all will know fully well that when you bring an expert witness to the court, those fees can run into thousands of dollars. The purpose would be you're trying to approach by saying, what is the purpose of a statute in terms of attorney fees? Well, the purpose is to make the plaintiff whole, so that the money he receives for winning the case is money he can keep, and he doesn't have to spend half of it on expert witnesses, paying all these guys he brought the course. But a textualist judge would say, and he won't agree with that, he would say, what is understood by attorney fees? And the fact of the matter is that attorney fees never thought to include expert witnesses fees. So therefore he wouldn't rule in favor of granting expert witnesses fees. Why did I go into all this detail? I want you to ask yourself, folks, how are your judges in Trinidad and Tobago appointed? Do you have a say, even a thought, through your representatives, your member of parliament? Do you know how to think? Do you know who they are? Don't buy the rubbish talk that to do so, to involve politics in the process, will create a political circus. It's already won. It's just that it's done behind doors, and sorry, closed doors that is, and we don't have a say in what goes on. And it's time for that to change. Because if judges are going to be appointed and we have to abide by their rulings, it's high time that we understand who they are, what they stand for. Moving on to another point. President Trump, fresh from his successful debate performance against Vice President Joe Biden, had a major announcement on Friday. Did you guys watch the debate? You should have. You should go back and try and have a look at it. It was totally different from debate number one, where Trump was more, he took Biden to the ropes, and this debate was more calm. Some people like the calm debate. I tend to prefer you putting the guy on the rope and let's see what he has to say. But this was a much calm debate. But back to Trump major announcement on Friday. What he said is that he made a peace deal between Sudan and Israel, which normalized relations. And the agreement, the third of its kind between Israel and an Arab nation, and it follows similar agreements between the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. Now, Trump said at least 5 additional Arab countries could join this peace deal with Israel, including Saudi Arabia. And I mentioned in this podcast sometime before that Saudi Arabia may very well join a peace deal with Israel. That's going to be Middle East changing. These peace deals as a result of Trump, and they come as a result of Trump's unconventional and successful approach to foreign policy. Now, Trump Middle East peace deals, when I look at it, they tend to reject conventional wisdom. President Trump rejected the advice of foreign policy establishment that the first step towards normalizing relations between Israel and the Arab world, that is to have a peace deal between Israel and Palestine, which was always wrong. Trump made it clear that Palestine leaders, that due to their long-time refusal, and Palestine continues to refuse to negotiate a peace deal with Israel, and they continue to have repeated attacks on Israel from Palestinian territory, and they have close ties with terrorist groups in Iran, and including Hezbollah, that the United States would no longer give them an effective veto over peace efforts with the United States and the Middle East. So, given these statements by Trump and this thinking, this resulted in Trump and the United States taking, long overdue steps to favoring closer ties with Israel and moving the Israeli embassy to Tel Aviv, from Tel Aviv, to Jerusalem. In an earlier era, Trump these moves would have outraged the Arab world, but I think the terrorist attacks against Israel and U.S. targets has now joined the Arab world, brought them closer to the U.S. Now, in some foreign policy experts' mind, there are 3 reasons why Trump has been able to make this progress with the Arab world, and I think these are 3 reasons that I've pulled out. First, he forged when he was appointed office, he forged stronger ties with Saudi Arabia. Second, he withdrew from the flawed nuclear deal with Iran in 2018, formed by the incoherent policy of Barack Obama and Joe Biden administration. That Iran, there's a whole story by itself. We'll deal with that on some other podcasts. And thirdly, Trump correctly foresaw that most Arab states are fed up with Palestine leaders for being an obstacle to peace and for their relationship with terrorist regimes like Iran and terrorist groups like Hezbollah and Hamas. And once they have gotten past that, peace was, basically inevitable. Now, this Israel-Sudan agreement is a huge win for Sudan and Israel, United States, and for the Middle East peace plan. Now, I don't know if you remember, but Sudan was involved in some terrorist group and some terrorist victims compensation, and they recently deposited $335 million to the United States bank accounts, which caused them to which was the beginning of this peace deal, and which allowed for the Sudan to be removed from the United States list of terrorism or terrorist countries. I remember when Democrats, they used to complain about Jared Kushner, who is Trump's son-in-law, and for their Mid East attempts to normalize relations throughout the Middle East. But they have had more success than anything else. And Democrats' silence now is amazing, and even the media silence is amazing as it relates to these peace deals that are constantly being turned out from the Trump White House. But I guess it just shows the hypocrisy, yes? Anyhow, folks, I think I've gone over my time for today. So let me just say thanks and stay tuned for episode 18 next week. Stay safe, folks.